Good morning, everyone. This is Kelley Hobart from Alpaca Direct, and I'm here on Technique Tuesday, and I'm talking about the baby surprise jacket. And you can see here, right in the top center, cute little jacket in the red and white. And so that's what I'm working on. I'll be working on that for this week and next week. And I wanted to go over it with you because when I decided to do the baby surprise, of course, I could not find my pattern. So it's somewhere in a very special place that I'm sure I was trying to keep it safe. It's so safe, nobody can find it. Anyway, I had to purchase a couple new patterns, and I don't think it's a waste of money because you want me to tell you something? This baby surprise method by Elizabeth Zimmerman has over 28,000 projects on Ravelry. And if you've been on Ravelry before, it is a knitting site where they have tons of patterns that are both free and paid for patterns. And that is a lot of projects for one pattern, don't you think, Jim? I can't think of any other pattern on Ravelry that has more projects than the baby surprise. And what I love about the baby surprise is that it teaches you to think outside the box because it has a very unusual way of construction, even though it's all in garter stitch. And it starts with some centered double decreases, and they're strategically placed on the pattern. And then you do that for a while, and then you will do some increases after you do your decreases. And it's actually, it's funny how it is because it doesn't look like a sweater at all. But when you get it done, you fold it and voila, it turns into a baby sweater. And they also have it in many different sizes, from babies to kids to adults. And in the pattern, it doesn't give you all the different stitch counts. It shows you how you can create your own stitch counts using whatever yarn that you're using. You check your gauge and you plug in those numbers and you go ahead and make it. So it's totally fantastic. Don't forget, as we're going along, to let us know where you're from. Maybe you can let us know what you're working on. We always love that. We always love new patterns and new project ideas, and maybe something for me to talk about in Technique Tuesday. So that's totally fantastic.
And guess who gave us the picture? Let us use the picture for your jacket.
Yes, Peggy Mowry, thank you so much for sharing your baby surprise. I haven't gotten much of a chance to work on mine. I have been working my little tail off on other things. And so I kind of got a little bit sidetracked. I got very little done on mine. And it's just a very beginning start on it. You can see I'm doing my decreases and I have my little stitch markers. And so you can see it's starting, but I have a ways to go. And so it's going to be fantastic. I use this Simplicity Spray by Haiku, and it is a Merino Superwash blend. And it is a non-itchy yarn. So for babies, I thought that would be great. And I am enjoying using this. The only thing is sometimes when I'm doing the center double decreases and that, you have to be a little bit careful because you can split the yarn. So I think using your lace tips for this kind of project is perfect. It works great. And I have a couple other colors here. And this is by Haiku. It's a top quality yarn. You can see it's very subtle striping. You see the very subtle stripes. And what makes for a good baby surprise jacket is the long stretches of colorways between each change. Either that, or you could just use scraps out of your closet and use one color and then blend into the next and to the next and whatever you want. You could use up scraps, and that's a great thing to do for this project as well. It's totally fantastic. So every week we have a prize, and for this last week it was for some vintage DK, and this was the color that won, a teal colorway.
Hold that up for a second.
Sure. So that was for vintage DK, and if you haven't tried vintage before by Baracco Yarn Company, it is a wool acrylic blend, and it's machine washable, perfect for babies. No itch at all. It's a very nice yarn. I love it. And it comes in DK weight, it comes in worsted weight, and it comes in chunky weight. And some of the colors go across all three platforms, so you can look for that if you want stuff to match and you want it in different weights. It's always a thought to use this yarn. It's fantastic. I've used it many times. And then I was thinking for the prize for this week is a knit coal yarn. And this has shorter colorways, but it still might make a nice baby surprise jacket. I think if I was doing this, I would get 2 skeins and maybe match up the colorways and then get longer strips of color by knitting with one ball of yarn until it back and forth with one color and then back and forth with another, and try and match them. So like if I was knitting with the pink and white dots on this Adriafil right here, then I would go back and forth with that pink and then back and forth with this pink and try and get a longer stretch of colorway. I might do that. It's actually, okay, so you can always get yourself into trouble, but it could turn out perfectly. You never know until you give it a try. But whoever wins this week, maybe they could try it. Because this is Knit Cole, and I have the color with the purple, and then maybe purples and brights. And whichever one you think that the winner should get, we can send it out in the mail next week. And to be entered for the contest, as always, if you post comments in that comment section, let us know what you're working on. You're entered to win automatically. And if you do win, all we need is to get your shipping information, and then we can send it in the mail to you. So this Adriafil Knit Cole, I've done many baby sweaters out of this, and it makes for a really nice baby sweater. It's totally fantastic. And this is by the Plymouth Yarn Company that we get it from. But it's a very nice yarn too.
Italian, right? Is that Italian?
Let me read on the back to you. It's made in Italy, yes. And it's 100% merino superwash. And this yarn is, you can knit with it all day long. I don't think it's not splitty at all. If I had to compare these 2 yarns together, this yarn is a little bit softer, but it's a tiny bit more splitty. And this yarn is not quite as soft, but it's not splitty at all. So it's whatever, every yarn has its pros and cons. And so you just have to decide which one you like. So that's totally fantastic. And I always love using different yarns. I don't know, it gives just give me a break from the different yarns.
So
using a new yarn's fun.
There was a question on the book about who is Elizabeth Zimmerman?
Oh my goodness. Elizabeth Zimmerman is an icon of knitting, and she's just world famous. And I think that right there is Elizabeth Zimmerman. And she has done so many different things to help knitting and bring it along. And she just is a wealth of knowledge. She was a great thinker. She thought outside the box. And so using her, the Complete Surprise book was, it gives you a bunch of information, the theory behind the design of the baby surprise, as well as the knitting pattern. So this book I bought on Amazon, a little bit expensive. I think it was like $24 or $25, but I thought it was worth it. I like learning new skills, and I like thinking outside the box. So if I can pick Elizabeth Zimmerman's brain and I can learn something from her, that's a great deal. So yes, it's invaluable. And I love how she showed across here that little baby, the surprise jacket. And so, yeah, I haven't done this one in a while. So when you're first knitting the baby surprise, if you look on Ravelry, there's like 50 million different sources to get the pattern. And when I'm looking at it, I'm going, which one should I choose? So she has a written pattern that you can have sent in the mail. So you can always do that. And it is by this Schoolhouse Press. And it's this pattern. I got the PDF version. And what I like about this actual pattern that you can buy is that it has all the numbers in there for many more sizes than just, and here the sizing's limited. She tells you how to do it yourself more so. In this one, it has other sizing options that are calculated for you. So if you want to get started right away, this is the Schoolhouse Press pattern, and it's from baby to adult surprise.
It looks like you might have used all my ink though.
I know. My husband is a saint. He is so patient with me when I burn through those cartridges printing out in color, but I just couldn't stand it because I was looking at it in black and white and it doesn't look as pretty So I have to use a colored ink. The sad part about the whole thing is if we look on the back, I think, hey, it's only 12 pages. It's only 12 pages.
Two-sided.
No, it isn't.
Oh.
I changed that, Jim.
Okay.
Jim put the preset so I can have two-sided. And sometimes I don't like two-sided because sometimes when I'm working on my patterns, I want the pages right next to each other so I can see where I'm going from one part down to the other. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And then it makes it easier for me to read. So I separate it sometimes. And Jim's patient again because I use up all of his paper. Has stacks of paper. It's like, sorry, honey. And he's like, can you go through this? I'm like, I need to save it all because they're all my precious patterns. And anyways, I don't have enough books for them. I need to get more books and actually organize it more. I did at one time organize the whole thing, but that paper gets printed pretty quickly. So the stacks add up again. Oh, well, so sad. Too bad. Anyway, so I wanted to spend 1 minute and take a look at.
Oh, what are they going to vote on then? What colors? Did you tell them what colors to vote on?
Yeah, we were going to do brights or purples for the Adriaphil Nicole. So the purples and then brights. I just thought,
okay,
Yeah. Anyways, so that was a good one to vote on. But I wanted to just take one second. So I wrote down the reasons why I like the pattern. It's great for social knitting because it's great, just knit stitch. So if you like social knitting, it's fantastic. And there's only like a few, it's either increasing or decreasing. And so you do have to kind of keep track of that. And then the fact that 28,000 people posted projects on Ravelry just makes me want to knit it. I'm just like, oh, and so I haven't had a chance to thank Peggy for allowing us to share her baby surprise. And I actually haven't seen it yet. I haven't seen the post yet. So I'll have to take a look at it later on today. But thank you, Peggy, for being such a wonderful knitter and so wonderful to help us out on Alpaca Direct. And the third reason why I love the pattern is that you get to think outside the box. It teaches you to just put stuff aside where you want to line everything up and make it straight and do something different. Yeah. So you get to learn some skills and you get to do something different. That's totally awesome. And of course, I'm making my baby surprise for Katie's baby. Everything's about Katie's baby right now. And so let's just take 1 second. And I wanted to show you just the differences in the two patterns, just so when you're trying to figure out if you want to purchase the book, then you could purchase the book. But some things that I wanted to show you. Do you see how there's all this writing on here? Well, there is some page by page instructions, but if you want a format of a pattern where it goes 1, 2, 3, 4 or whatever, you have to read this whole pattern. Otherwise you could possibly skip something or miss something. And so I almost think if you've never experienced the baby surprise before, doing this actual pattern where it's written out for you, this one's nice because, see, it gives you instructions for a little bodysuit, a scarf, if you want to get used to the technique, a little girl's jacket, doing color work, just the whole concept behind her design. So that teaches you how you can change it and make it, add things to it. So it is a very nice book, but this pattern, I believe, is a little easier to follow because it gives you all your stitch counts, and that is totally fantastic. Now, when I was doing mine, I thought, should we do the slip stitch edge, like knit to the end of the row to the last stitch and slip that stitch, or do it in the beginning of the row or what have you? It says the red line indicates the cast on edge around the cuffs and all along the shoulders. So this red line is your cast on edge, and then this is going to become this is the neck or what have you. So I guess the risk that you run into is that when you're trying to seam the different pieces together, because you basically fold it in half and it turns into a jacket, that you might be seaming a non-slip stitched edge to a slip stitch edge. So I thought maybe for the first baby surprise, not slipping the stitch on the end or the beginning would make it easier. But you see, it shows you all the different, what you're doing and the concepts behind it and putting in buttonholes and all kinds of stuff. So it's a really fantastic pattern, I think. And you can learn all the way from adults to kids you could do. So I thought it's a pretty neat. And she shows you all different techniques from doing the applied I-cord or the I-cord bind off, freestanding I-cord, how to seam it together, all kinds of stuff. You learn a ton of stuff. So, but what I wanted to talk to you about is when we're doing the most important thing when you're doing your baby surprise jacket is making sure that you mark the front of your jacket so you know which side is the front and which is the back. So I did this little sample. So if this was my jacket, I would mark the front with a locking stitch marker. So if I do have to rip back or what have you, then I can do that without getting confused as to which side is the front of my fabric and which is the back. So I was going to knit over to where we would do the center double decrease. And she has you use a locking stitch marker around that stitch. And you can see it right here. It's locked onto that stitch. I had to knit back. It has a center double decrease row and then you knit back. So when you would actually work all the way to one stitch before that center stitch, and then you would slip that stitch as if to knit from the left hand needle to the right hand needle. And then you would go ahead and knit two together. And then you take that slip stitch and pass it over the top. So it is a 2-stitch decrease. And it's centered.
So what's that called again?
It's a centered double decrease. And this is what you do in the beginning of the baby surprise jacket. And then you would, when you're done with that, if you just snug it up just a tiny little bit, so it's like at the same gauge as you're knitting, because sometimes it can get a little loose. And then you would work all the way to the end. And I'm going to go ahead and slip that stitch with my yarn in front because it's on the next row I'm going to be knitting. So in order to have the working yarn in the working position, that's what you do. So, and then on the next row, all you do is, again, you would just knit all the way across. It's what they call a rest row. So you do a decrease row, and then you do a rest row. And then you do a decrease row, and you want to kind of keep your stitch marker on the right side of your work and not let it pass over to the wrong side of your work. So you would do that. All right. So say that I'm working and I mess up on the pattern and I have to go backwards and rip my work out. The first thing that I would do is take my locking stitch marker just to identify the right side of the work. Okay. And I'll show you how this works. So I would put that stitch marker on the right-hand side of my work, and I would go ahead and take the circular needles out, and then I would go ahead and pull out to where I need to. Sometimes what I'll do is I will pull it not till all the way to the end, because if I can just work backwards right there on the end stitch, then make sure that that end stitch stays properly mounted so that it doesn't get turned and look funny. So my wool is kind of sticking to itself. So all I do is when I'm going backwards, I tell the students, just get your needles on the stitches. And if you have to use like a sock needle, which is a tiny little needle, you can always knit off of it and do you see right there's another stitch that I missed, but let's actually, I would go back and pick that up. So when I put it on my needle, I can put it with the right hand leg in front and then it's properly mounted, or I can just put it on any way that I can put it on and then go back and fix it. So what I mean by that is, so right here I'm 3 stitches before the end, and you know where the last stitch is because that's where the working yarn is. So if I was going to go back to that one, I would actually just take my working yarn here and open up the stitch and then dive straight into it and just go backwards for those 3. And on the last stitch, if you get confused on how to do it, you're diving into it again, remember that you just can go down underneath that strand of yarn and then it releases it there. And then if you just want to go across your row and make sure all your stitches are mounted correctly, you would just go needle tip to needle tip, making sure that right hand leg. So see how this looks like a horseshoe if you open it up? If you put the right hand leg in front, then your stitch is mounted correctly. And then you won't have a twisted stitch. What I mean by a twisted stitch, if you get a twisted stitch, your stitch is like that. It's actually twisted at the bottom. And you'll find that it's really hard to knit when you go to try to knit it if it's twisted. So you just go back across and you can, pick up the stitches with a smaller needle and then use your regular size needle to go back across your row and make sure they're mounted correctly. So see, here I am. I have it mounted correctly now. And I would just thread my needle through and I would be ready to work again. And so if you see right here, and I would go back across, I know this is the right side of my work because I had marked it with the stitch marker. And then I would just knit across until, I'll show you that center stitch. You want to do it until there's one stitch before the center stitch. And so right here is where that the center stitch is. And so you would go to one stitch before, actually, I'm looking at it, sorry, this one right here. My stitch marker didn't mark the center stitch. I just used it to mark the front of my work. But when I'm looking here, this is the centered stitch because you see how this stitch flips over that center stitch? That's my center stitch. So I'd back up one stitch and I would slip this one as if to knit. Then I would knit two together and flip that right on over. And then I would take my blue stitch marker and of course mark that stitch. You can easily, if you're watching TV, mark the wrong stitch and your line will have a little jag in it. It is not a good look. And I don't like that. So I would definitely, if I did that, I would have to go back and fix it because it would drive me nuts. But I'll show you what this looks like in just 1 second here. So, and then I slip with my yarn in front because on the next row, I'm going to be knitting. So my working yarn needs to be in position. If I was going to purl, I would slip it with the yarn in back because when I turn it, my yarn would need to be in the front so that I can purl. So that's how you tell where you put your working yarn. You need to put it in position. So this first stitch on this next row has a working yarn in the position that you need it in to be able to work. So there is, see my center double decrease is right here. 1, 2, 3. See how they're all in a row? That's another way to check because what you literally can see the 2 strands of yarn. So it's easy to identify. See how these stitches only have 1 strand, but this one has 2. So that's how you can identify that centered double decrease, as well as from the front. You could see this stitch that was flipped over the top. It's this stitch right here. This is the one that we slipped and then bounded off right over the top of that stitch. So this is the centered stitch. Isn't that cool? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So anyway, that is how you do that. And like I said, I don't know about slipping the stitch for a first-time knitter of the Baby Surprise. I think it might be easier just to go ahead and knit it so it's in garter stitch all the way to the end. And that way, if you have to seam different things together, then you can seam, 2 garter stitch edges, and you won't be seaming a slip stitch edge with a garter stitch edge. So for next week, I am going to be talking about this Baby Surprise again, and we're going to take a look at seaming. So we're going to do that. And
there was a question about the knit club. So they said, what was it? So I thought you could just show them what
you did. Oh, yes.
Month.
This is our lovely scarf that we have for this month. Isn't it beautiful?
Hold it up a little bit.
Can you see?
And what did they learn in the
Beautiful. Well, we did this nice little edging. Do you see the little edging here? It's a slip stitch edging. It kind of looks like ribbing, but it is not ribbing. It's kind of like double knit ribbing. And I just really like it because it is like thick. It adds substance to the edge, more substance than actual ribbing. It's thicker. And so it kind of went nice with this pattern.
You have the hearts, right?
Yes, this is kind of it's kind of heart-esque without being too Valentine's-y. So you can wear it for any time you want to wear a scarf, and it'll still, people won't know that it's kind of a heart. I mean, unless you know about it. But this was a really fun project. It has this lovely Bravo alpaca. We had 2 skeins of it, and so it made for a nice long wide scarf. And so yeah, it was really fun to make. I like this one was kind of social knitting too. Once you get started, it's so fantastic. You just have to do that first setup row on your pattern to increase the stitch count up to get to your, you decrease it in the beginning and you increase it on the other end so that your ribbing stays the same width as your actual pattern. Cool. Totally fantastic. So anyway, we're always learning stuff in our knit club, and I have a lot of videos that I did.
16.
And so, yes, there's a lot of videos. But I give you little tips and tricks like, spit splicing, how to take your, when you're ready to join a new skein of yarn to your work, how to do it so that you don't have to weave in any ends. And it's a nice sturdy.
The long loop.
Yes, and that was called a long loop stitch. And that was fun. And so, yeah, it was a nice project. I liked it. It was kind of a social knitting one. I kind of felt like it was still close enough to Christmas that we're all a little bit tired and we need to have some fun without having to have a brain twister. So anyway, yeah, I had fun knitting. That was really nice. So next week, again, like I said, I'm going to be doing the baby surprise and I'll be finishing that up. And who is our winner for this week? Okay.
It's on the back page. There.
I didn't see it. Oh my goodness. I know you have it for me. Where? I don't. 1 second here. Oh, Donna. Right. Okay. Donna Glade. Yes. Sorry. Thank you, honey. I appreciate that. Donna Glade, you won, and you won some vintage DK. So all you have to do is get in touch with customer service and we can get this in the mail to you. You'll like it. Vintage DK is a very versatile yarn that can be used for all kinds of stuff, whether you use it for a hat or mittens or what have you. It's fantastic. So Donna Glade, congratulations. I hope you enjoy this lovely yarn. So that's great. And then for this week, don't forget to vote. We have brights or purples. And this is the Adriaphil Knit Coal, which is 100% merino superwash yarn. Totally fantastic. Makes great little kid stuff. And you can use it for adults too. It's totally fantastic. So I hope you guys have a great week and we will see you next Tuesday.